Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and we're very happy to welcome you to the Castle Hotel here this evening, where it's our first and our pilot and new programme on talking about Macroom, unemployment, employment, job opportunities. It's a very, very wide subject and a very wide area. I'm very happy to be joined by two gentlemen here with me this evening. I have on my right Brendan O'Brien, who is Vice Principal of the Mahegan Vocational School. And Brendan has had a lot of experience in dealing with people who have been unemployed, placing them in jobs and that type of thing. And I think Brendan would be certainly in a situation where he could help us out and thinking about Macroom and what we can do with helping people to get into jobs and that type of thing. Now we can widen the discussion outside of that totally. On my left I have John Roach. John is living in Codram, not too far away from myself. His company is called Medco, and he formed the company in 1980. Now, he has a new factory recently built in Codram, and he's employing 12 people. This really is a fantastic situation when you think of the way employment is going in the country. But it's a belief of myself, of my own, that smaller units are the best to do. Now. The idea of this program, really, it's hard to define it, but the whole idea of the program is to promote Macroom and the area, not Macroom itself, the area as well, with regard to jobs and with regard to developing what we can buy here in the area rather than buying it outside. That's another situation. But as chairman of this discussion tonight, I'm also chairman of the Macroom Traders and Development Association. We are trying to keep jobs in Macroom and try to develop more jobs for Macroom. Now, could I first of all come to John? A lot of people wonder, in a sense, how do you start up your own business? I mean, it obviously does. It takes a lot of thinking and obviously money as well. Could I ask you how you got about this situation in the first?
Well, the initial thing is to get an idea that you think yourself is viable, and you go on from there and you research the market, make sure that there is an adequate market for the product you propose to manufacture. Once that you have established that it is a viable venture, your next step would possibly be to go to the various state agencies that will give you assistance, and both technical and financial. And here, of course, you'd have the main agency would be the IDA, also the West Cork Development Association. And say in Macroom, you could talk to the council and establish whether there are premises available, etc. That would be the initial.
Can I just ask you one thing there? In 1980 it might have been a lot easier than it is now. Is it as easy now to get a grant from the IDA or to get money from the ICC or whatever as it was?
If you have a viable proposition, there is no problem as things stand currently.
I see. Yeah.
That is the main problem. That I know they get lots of people with ideas which, when they are investigated thoroughly, they turn out to be, well, not viable.
Right. I understand. Can I come to Brendan now for 1 second? Brendan, your side of the discussion could be totally different to what we've talked to John about. I know that you have been very much involved in placing people in employment over the years, especially because of the fact that you're teaching anyway. And you obviously have seen what children go through when they come out of school and can't get a job. I know. What do you see the prospects? I mean, it's very difficult to answer that question. But I know what the prospects do you see at the moment, or can you even think that can they get better?
Well, let it be said at the outset that, of course, I'm dealing at a very different end of the scale to that which John outlined. Now, the message of today has to be that the longer people stay in school, the greater their chances are of employment. And I have here in front of me some figures which will show that. For instance, early school leavers would be people that would have no intercert and no group cert. Last year, 58%, or 58 out of every 100, were employed. Of those who had group cert and intercert done, 65 were employed. And of those who had leaving cert done, 85 were employed. Now the message very clearly there is that the longer one stays in school, the better one's chances are of being employed. Now having said that, there is no doubt about it, excuse me, there is no doubt at all that there are an awful lot of people leaving school early without any qualifications whatsoever.
Yeah.
And these people are searching around looking for jobs. Now equally, my experience of the Macroom situation has been, and in dealing with employers during the last 5 years that I've worked in the careers area in Macroom, has been that they find it very difficult, incredibly, they find it very difficult to get suitable people.
You were talking about employers in Macroom, the Macroom area?
I am talking about, yes.
Right.
It's quite an extraordinary thing that when you go into the shops, the supermarkets, the factories and so on, the employers will tell you that they have some openings, yes, but it's very difficult for them to get people who have got the right work ethic. And they're very careful about who they take on, because we're in a day and age when it's a lot easier to take somebody on than it is to let
This is just what I
somebody
was going to
go.
say to you, Brendan. I mean, do you think there's an attitude in the employer situation? I mean, their attitude to who they're going to employ. Or John, would you have some idea there? Because I mean, you're employing people as well. I mean, the way the employers do employ people in the Macroom, have they some funny idea about employing people? Or
Personally, no. Providing somebody is suitable for the job, and you can establish fairly quickly whether or not they have the right approach towards work,
right.
which is what it's all about. And once you've established that, I think that there is no great problem. Generally, we have found that the employees that we've had have been
Quality.
first class,
Right, first class, yeah.
first class people.
Good. Can I come back to you there, Brendan? There's something you said about staying in school for, the longer you stay in school,
Yes.
the better.
Yes.
But unfortunately, in this day and age,
Mhm.
a lot of parents can't afford to leave their children in school.
Yes, it's becoming more expensive, and it looks as though that trend is going to continue. And I'm a little bit worried that we're going to go back to an elitist stage, which we had probably in the 50s and 60s, where only those who can afford to be educated are going to be educated.
Right.
Now, in some ways, that, of course, would have the effect of levelling out an employment situation, because only the privileged would then be educated enough to be employed. And that's a very unfortunate development.
It is, of course, yes.
Also, of course, there is this to it, that with the education system as it stands at the moment, we probably have, and I think it is widely recognised, that we do have one of the finest educational systems in the world. People who leave Ireland to work abroad are very, very much sought after. And I think there's a lot of evidence of that in the ads in the newspapers now. When you look at the ads in the Sunday papers and on the daily papers, I saw today, for instance, the QE2 was advertising for people in the catering business. You know?
Really? Yeah.
And I think this is a recognition when you look at of the very high standard of education and the very high standards that Irish working people take with them.
Yes.
Around the world.
Well, there's no doubt about that. I mean, that's been generally recognised over the years. That it's always been said that Paddy works better when he goes away anyway.
Mhm.
But Paddy does work fairly well. He's a good worker when he goes working.
Yes.
But I mean, sorry, John, I can actually come back to a comment that was made recently by a reasonably well-known politician, that there wasn't enough room for all the people that live in this country. Now, I mean, that to me seems to be a ridiculous statement, because, I mean, if you take Holland or any of the smaller countries in Europe, where they have, twice, 3 times the population we have, and they all live well, and they all have good employment. So the big problem we seem to have here in Ireland is, where do we go wrong? I mean, there are quite a few entrepreneurs that do very well, but basically the rest of the situation doesn't seem to work. Can any of you comment on that?
Well, I think in the past, again, some of the state agencies tended to look on big organisations employing 1,000 people. And hopefully they have seen the error of their ways, in that now we have to look at the small units employing 1, 2, 3 or 4 people. And I think you are far better off to have in a town 10, 15, 20 small units
Yes.
employing 3 or 4 people.
Definitely,
And again, I think that way the employees can be motivated far better than in a large organisation. And coming back to Brendan's point there about overseas people looking for Irish employees, again I think that they find that they have the motivation when they go away. They have to work harder to prove themselves, and so consequently they end up being first-class people to employ.
Right.
And it comes back to motivation, I feel.
Do you feel they're lacking that motivation in Ireland when they work in the Irish workplace?
Some places perhaps, but that's why I say that if you can keep it small, you can motivate people a lot easier. Because if you have a very large organisation, an employee just becomes a number.
Right.
Say, for example, if you have 1,000 people in an establishment, one person is a nobody, really.
Right. But he has to be a number there anyway.
Yeah, he's just a
The
number.
thing is so
He's
big,
just
he has to be a number, yeah.
Yeah. So whereas if you've got 5 people employed, 4 people employed, one person, that's 25% of your workforce.
That's it,
So
yeah.
the person at that stage turns out to be very, very important, quite crucial to the business, and the person himself or herself can see the contribution
That's
that
right.
he or she is making,
Yeah.
and appreciates the well, what happens if the job is not done well.
Yes.
Yeah.
But if I could just come in here, Pat, on this, I certainly would endorse from anything I've read. I would endorse what you're saying there, John. And I know that the American experience, and generally speaking, we kind of come in 10 years later, I think, into what America has been doing. And I read somewhere that there was something like, I can't sort of dish out the figures now, but there was something like 11 million people unemployed in America in a particular year. But in that same year, 11 million new jobs had been created. Now, those new jobs were not Henry Ford type of situations.
Exactly.
They were your man down the road who opened his garage, started a small industry in there, got 3 people working for him, and grew in that way. And all of these units, there were only 4 or 5 people
Right.
actually working.
But the
in
whole
these
thing really
units.
comes, sorry, Brendan, it comes back there to innovation, in a sense, doesn't it? You know,
It
I
does,
mean,
yes.
you know, or, you know, a bit of.
Well, it's also kind of don't necessarily think big. I know that with development associations and that in Macron now,
Yes.
and I've been sort of part of these
Right,
just as much
yeah.
as anybody else, where we've put a lot of hours and a lot of energy into attracting industry into the town. And you chase after the paper stacks and you chase after the sellotape factories
Right.
and that kind of thing. And you spend years and years of and hours of meetings, and you may still not come up with anything at the end of all that. Now, fine. The idea is out there and it's attracting those people in anyway, and I'm not too sure that Brendan O'Brien or Pat Keller can do a whole lot about it.
Yes.
Or maybe they can. But I think that certainly what Brendan O'Brien and Pat Kelleher and John Roach can do is try to deal with individuals who have a business idea and who would like to develop that business idea and set up some kind of unit that will advise these people and tell them, look, this is how you do it. You tell me, John particularly there has such
Exactly, yeah.
expertise
Mhm.
in the field. Take one individual, what can I do for you? And you'll find that, you know, get one person on the road and then the next. I was horrified to read in the notes and newses of Passage West
Yes.
12 months ago that there was a development association in Passage West 2 years ago. And at their annual meeting 1 year later they sat down and they reported in the newspaper that 1 year later they had succeeded in creating one job. One job.
Uno.
Yes. Now, I was a member of a development association,
Right,
and
true.
I
That's
was
right.
inclined to pour a lot of contempt on the people in Passage West at that time.
Yes.
Because I was doing exactly what Passage West was doing as well. I
Mhm.
was out there fighting for a factory for Macron. Now, a year later, I had to say that I hadn't even created one job. You know?
Yes.
But then when we changed strategy a bit and we said, look, let's help individuals,
Individuals. Yeah.
we had an awful lot more success then at
Exactly.
that stage. It was much better.
Not alone that, Brendan and John, and I'm sure you'll agree with me both of you, is that when you have a situation like, with, I would say, paper sacks, or the sellotape factory that went a couple of years back, when that happens, it hits the town so hard.
Precisely.
You know, when it's so big, I mean, there might have 100 people employed or 150 people employed, but it hits the place so hard, it's not half as bad. I mean, if somebody goes.
Well, precisely. If you have 20 units employing 5 people each, and if 1 or 2
Yeah.
will fail, okay, you only have 10 people.
But they will never all go together anyway.
They won't all go together.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas if paper sacks go, or if the tapes, I think tapes are employing about 200 people at one stage.
At one stage, nearly
You
200
see,
people.
this is the thing. So when it goes, you have 200 people unemployed.
That's right, and that's a devastating situation
yeah,
for any
yeah.
for any town, not alone with Rome.
Going back to a point you made about the big businesses in America, particularly, I think that you will find that the employment in the very large corporations is actually decreasing, whereas all the increase is coming from the small units, as you were saying, the small 2, 3, 4 man
Yes.
units.
Yes. All right. Well, gentlemen, on that note, I think we can finish our discussion, and I'm very glad to have had both of you here. Thank you very much for joining our discussion. What I would say to our viewers is that this was, as I said earlier on, a pilot discussion and a pilot program. If anybody has any ideas or any contribution they think they could make to us, they can always contact me, myself, at home, and that's at Codham and in Macroom, and my telephone number is 026 41340. That's Pat Kelleher. Good night, thank you.